What happens when you laugh at someone in their lowest moment, only to discover they're about to become your new boss? Follow one woman's journey from judgment to realization, as she learns the power of second chances and the surprising twists life can take. I had just finished a long day of meetings and was looking forward to grabbing a quick dinner. As I walked into the restaurant, I noticed a waiter fumbling around, dropping a tray of drinks. He looked so embarrassed. His face red, and it made me feel uncomfortable. But honestly, I couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't mean-spirited, just a nervous chuckle. I thought to myself, how does someone mess up that badly? He quickly scrambled to clean it up, and I noticed how hard he was trying. It wasn't as though he wasn't capable. It just seemed like everything was going wrong for him tonight. I felt bad, but my laughter was still escaping before I could stop it. He didn't say anything to me. He just glanced at me with a small, forced smile and went about his job. He was a bit older than I expected, probably in his late 30s, but it seemed like this was the kind of job he needed to make ends meet. After all, who am I to judge? Dinner carried on around me, the clink of silverware and soft hum of conversations blending into the background as I tried to enjoy my meal. The food was exquisite, just what I needed to end a long day of work. The tender steak, the crisp vegetables, and the rich, savory sauce all blended perfectly together. I focused on it for a while, letting the warm atmosphere of the restaurant soothe me through. But then, every time my gaze wandered, there he was. The waiter. His movements were a blur of frantic energy, his face flushed, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to balance plates, refilling glasses, and ensuring everything was in order. I could see the stress written all over him, even as he forced a smile at the guests. His eyes flickered nervously, constantly scanning for approval or the next task. I noticed him stumble once again, this time spilling a glass of water, the liquid sloshing onto the table with a quiet splash. His cheeks burned even brighter as he apologized profusely, wiping up the mess with a cloth. It wasn't that he wasn't trying. He was putting in the effort, working hard, maybe too hard. But you could tell he wasn't used to the pressure. Some people around him were impatient, glancing at their watches or exchanging frustrated looks, but none of them actually yelled or acted rude. They were just waiting for things to go smoothly. A pang of guilt tugged at my chest. Had I been too harsh when I laughed earlier? I turned my attention back to my meal, but my mind kept drifting back to him. It wasn't just the spilled drinks or the awkwardness I noticed. It was something else. The way he carried himself despite everything. He was trying to keep it together, and he was doing so quietly, without making a scene. I couldn't help but admire his quiet resilience. The next time I looked up, he was standing near my table, a stack of dirty plates in his hands. He moved slowly this time, perhaps more careful than usual, but still with that tense energy that made him seem like he was rushing against a clock. I could see the anxiety in his eyes. But when he reached my table, he looked at me, his face softening just a little as our eyes met. It was almost like a relief. He knew I wasn't going to judge him like the others. I smiled at him, my voice gentle as I offered some comfort. It's all right. Things happen. Don't stress. He paused, as if my words gave him a moment to breathe. For a second, he looked at me with surprise, like maybe he hadn't expected someone to be kind in that moment. His lips parted slightly, and then he smiled. Shyly, but with genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter than I expected. "I really appreciate it. I don't usually mess up like this." I nodded, trying to reassure him. The guilt from earlier resurfaced, and I found myself wishing I could take back that brief laugh. It felt so silly now, especially as I realized how hard he was trying, how easy it is to judge someone based on a single mistake. But it wasn't too late to change the way I saw him. I reminded myself, I wasn't the kind of person who would hold on to those moments. I wasn't cruel. "Don't worry, you're doing great. Just keep going." His shoulders relaxed slightly at my words, and he gave a small nod. For a moment, we just stood there. Him trying to hide his nervousness, and me quietly hoping he'd find some peace in the small reassurance I had offered. Without another word, he moved on to the next table, continuing his work. But this time, as he walked away, I noticed a small shift in his posture. He seemed a little less tense, a little more certain. And maybe, Just maybe, I had helped with that, even in the smallest way. I watched him for a while, moving from table to table, carefully serving and handling his responsibilities, his back straighter now, more composed. It wasn't much, but it was something. And as I finished my meal, I couldn't help but feel that I had witnessed a small, quiet victory. It was a simple exchange, a few words of kindness, but for him, maybe it meant more than I could imagine. The morning of the next day arrived with its usual rush. I walked into the office, my mind already flooded with tasks, emails to answer, calls to return, a never-ending list of meetings. I braced myself for the busy day ahead, as I always did. The familiar hum of office chatter greeted me as I entered the building. I barely took notice of the people around me, just focusing on getting to my desk and diving into the work that awaited me. But then something caught my eye. As I approached the conference room, I saw a figure standing in front of the doors. A man, tall and confident, with a posture that radiated authority. He wasn't in a uniform or carrying a tray of food. He wasn't hurrying around like the night before, apologizing for every little mistake. Instead, he stood there, immaculate in a sharp suit, his gaze focused and steady. His stance was completely different from the disoriented waiter I'd seen the night before. I blinked, certain my eyes were playing tricks on me. Is that him? I took a step forward, my mind still processing the scene, but before I could fully gather myself, his eyes met mine. And then, with a brief but genuine smile, he spoke. "Karen, it's good to see you again." I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The words felt strange coming from him, and the realization hit me like a wave. This was the same man? The one I had laughed at last night? Wait. My voice faltered as I stammered, trying to piece together what was happening. "You're?" He gave me a knowing look and nodded, as though this moment of confusion was something he'd anticipated. "Yes," he said with quiet confidence. "I'm the new CEO of the company. I'll be working closely with all of you moving forward." My mind raced, struggling to process the words that had just come out of his mouth. The same guy who had been carrying trays and spilling drinks just hours ago? The same man who I had silently mocked for his clumsiness and struggle? He was now the CEO of the company? How was this possible? How had I not seen this coming? Was this some kind of joke? I couldn't reconcile the image of the overwhelmed waiter with the self-assured CEO standing before me now. My stomach churned with confusion, disbelief, and, dare I admit, embarrassment. The rest of the day felt like a blur. I sat through meetings, nodding along, trying to focus, but my thoughts kept wandering back to him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how terribly wrong I had been. How foolish I had been to laugh at him, to assume his worth was tied to his job as a waiter. How could I have reduced him to that single moment? The image of him from last night, the one trying so hard to keep his composure while juggling plates and drinks, seemed like a completely different person now. But in reality, it was the same man. The same person who had been capable of rising from where he was, finding the strength and determination to transform his life completely. I could feel the weight of my mistake pressing down on me, like a heavy stone in my chest. How could I have judged him like that? I thought. There was so much more to him than I had ever known. That laugh, so careless and thoughtless, now felt like the deepest form of disrespect. The day dragged on, and before I knew it, the meeting had concluded. People started filtering out of the conference room, heading back to their desks or grabbing a coffee. I stood still in the hallway, my mind lost in a maze of thoughts. I didn't know how to face him now, especially after everything that had happened. As if on cue, he walked past me. He didn't look at me at first, just continued his path, his steps purposeful, his expression unreadable. He was no longer the unsure waiter, and I couldn't even read him the way I used to. But then, as if sensing my presence, he stopped and turned to face me. "Karen," his voice was calm, steady, but there was an underlying warmth in it. "I know you were probably shocked earlier. It's okay. We all have moments when we're unsure. And honestly, I get it." His eyes softened slightly, as though he understood my confusion, my own discomfort. "But I just wanted to remind you of something," he continued. "Everyone has their own path. Don't judge someone just because of one bad moment." His words hit me harder than I had expected. I swallowed, my throat tight with emotion. It wasn't just the realization of how wrong I had been. It was the clarity of what he was saying. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to make me feel guilty. Instead, he was offering me a lesson, one I so desperately needed. "I'm sorry," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. The apology was genuine, coming from a place deep inside. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't thinking." He smiled, soft, understanding. It wasn't the awkward, forced smile I had seen last night. This time, his smile was filled with a quiet confidence, the kind of smile that only someone who had truly overcome adversity could give. "You didn't hurt me, Karen. But I hope you remember this moment," he said, his voice carrying a weight of experience. "Things can change overnight. You never know what someone has been through to get to where they are. And sometimes, the most unexpected people are the ones who rise to the top." His words stayed with me long after he had walked away. Things can change overnight. How true that was. In that brief exchange, he had taught me more than I had learned in weeks, not just about him, but about life, about the fragility of assumptions, and about the power of perseverance. I stood there, staring after him, feeling the full impact of what had just happened. It wasn't just an apology I owed him anymore. It was a shift in my perspective, one I would carry with me moving forward. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of awe and humility. I found myself watching him closely, seeing how he managed the office, how he led with grace and decisiveness. He wasn't the same man who had stumbled the night before. He had proven that he was more than capable of handling whatever came his way. And slowly, I started to understand. It wasn't about his past or the mistakes he had made. It was about his perseverance, his strength, his ability to rise above and keep going, no matter the odds. That was the lesson I needed. It wasn't just about the laughter I'd thrown at him. It was about the growth, the humility, and the deep respect that I began to feel for him. And so, from that day forward, I made sure to remember his story. I wouldn't let myself forget that people are never as simple as they seem. Their journeys are complex, and sometimes you need to step back and listen before forming any judgments. Hey there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Your support means the world to us. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. And if you know someone who'd enjoy this too, feel free to share it with them. Thanks for being part of the community.